Buenos días, bienvenidos y bienvenidas. Mi nombre es Mirna
Welcome
Hernández.
all of you. My name is Mirna Hernandez. I will be the moderator in this session. On the name of UTEC, C2A, and the organizers, we would like to thank you for your participation in the second edition of Educamp. We hope that all the information and tools that we will share in these talks and discussion webinars will be enriching for all of you. Before starting, we would like to say that we have for speaker Ulf, Martin, Jorge Daniel. They will provide their presentation in 10 minutes. And then you have a round of questions. And we would appreciate that you would provide your consults in the chat box. We will start the roundtable with the importance of self-directed learning in virtual surroundings. The specialist will have the importance of having the proposal of the virtual learning for the use of using learning tools during the pandemics. And the participants will provide the answers regarding the information that we need to do for self-directed learning and the barriers when it comes to universities to implement experiences for self-directed learning. We will start the presentations. The first speaker is Ulf Daniels Ehlers. He is the elected Vice President of the European Association for Institutes of Higher Education in his second term, and Director and member of the Executive Committee of the European Distance and E-Learning Network. Ulf is a founding member and past president of the European Foundation for Quality in E-Learning. From 2008 to 2010, he has served as elected president of the largest association for e-learning in German-speaking countries. We hear you, Ulf, with your presentation.
Thank you very much for the introduction and also for being able to share some thoughts with you. Actually, when I was asked to talk about the autonomous learning and self-directed learning in virtual learning environments, I decided today for this talk to give it a little twist and to talk about the future learners, which is a little bit a macro perspective, and is talking about the persons we will have in front of us as our students. I'm not going today to talk so much about the classroom actions, like my well-esteemed colleague Eric Mazur has done in his brilliant talk. I would like to share with you a few thoughts which we have developed in our research and which is addressing the future of higher education. And tomorrow in my keynote, I'm going to deepen this a little bit more with some more thoughts. So it's just a brief advanced information today. The research which we did on future learning and the future of higher education is all open, accessible, and downloadable in English. The books we published in Springer, they are all downloadable, and you can go to this website and download a copy for yourself. We have just started a new initiative in which we now want to find very advanced future higher education programs in all 5 continents. And you can contribute to this project with a small video of your innovation or with a chapter to our publication, which we are intending to launch. If you need more information, go to this webpage and have a look at the Global Future Skills Project, which is just starting now. In a nutshell, this is what I'm going to talk about. In our research, we very much identified that the future university needs to target future skills. And future skills have to do with equipping and enabling learners to act self-organized in a future context which they do not know, which they are not prepared for. In emergent situations, in problematic contexts. In these kind of contexts, where all our graduates in the future will have to shape their organizations, their fields of works, their societies, these competencies, these skills are necessary. And you can see here on the left side that one of them is, of course, self-efficacy. Another one, learning literacy, self-determination, self-competence, reflective competence, initiative and performance competence, but also ambiguity and ethical competence. And of course, the big question is, how can we implement these learning experiences so that learners and students are well equipped with these skills? But before we talk about that or discuss that in the roundtable questions, I think we should have a look at the future students. So I would like to very, very briefly in the end here of my talk, give an impulse of 4 students. So first of all, here, the first one, meet Florence. Florence is, imagine she's just 20 years and wants to start her studies. Florence has recently joined a group, the Global Changemakers. It's a group of international environmental activists, and she wants to shape the future of society. And she wants to do that by entering the lion's den. She wants to go to Google because she wants to break the system from inside. From conversations she knows, at Google, however, they are not interested in university degrees any longer, but they are interested in what they call future skills. This future skills is about developing a mission rather than making a master. Future skills are, for example, skills like taking responsibility, taking decisions, being innovative and creative, being able to work well in international teams, and ethical competencies. So Florence asks herself, future skills, where can I study them? Secondly, here, meet Lena. Lena, she has already started her studies, and she's now finding out more and more that there are interesting courses at other universities as well, just which interests her as well, just for her interests. Many of them are even online. She therefore decides she wants to study in a completely networked way and enrolls at many universities at the same time. We call this the future of higher education, the multi-institutional study model. Lena wants to become a marine biologist. It should be networked, it should be international, preferably at universities around the Baltic Sea or the Mediterranean. Is that possible? Or here, meet Bashir. Bashir has already started, but then dropped out of his studies. Somehow he doesn't fit into the system. Sure, at first he was very interested in business psychology, the subject he had chosen. But then he was also interested in literary studies and theater pedagogy. After all, that's exactly what you can use later as a human resource manager, he thought. He would love to build his own curriculum. We call this the personalized curriculum. But where can you do that? Build your own curriculum. And then you can finally, the fourth persona is Niels. You can meet Niels. Niels has been an experienced social worker for 15 years, and he works with young people. He now wants to study social management, but with only as much time as he has available, besides family and job and sports club. And he wonders if there isn't a way that all of his experience can then be recognized in his new studies. Because he has already seen the contents of the study modules on deviant behavior in adolescence and social psychology, which is on his curriculum. This contents he already knows. He knows them inside and out from his practice and his 15 years of practice. So couldn't he just study the way it suits him? We call that a lifelong academic education. So we believe that this is the master narrative of the future of higher education, to somehow be able to serve these different purposes. It should be borderless, international, experiential learning, like we listened before to Eric's presentation. It should be lifestyle integrated. There should be lifelong learning possibilities. Short courses are important. Digital is meaningful. So these are the 4 gravitation centers which will compose the future of our higher education institutions. That's what I wanted to share with you as an impulse. Think about these personas and how we can today cater them with their different interests. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Ol.
Thank you, Wolf. And thank you for those interesting views. And our panelist number 2 is Martin Balkar. Martin has a PhD in the University of Antwerp, Belgium, and he has received a instructional sciences degree in the University of Ghent, and he's head of the Department of Educational Studies in the Faculty of Psychology and Education. His actual field of research focuses mainly on the innovation of higher education and the integrated use of information and communication technology. In addition, he's a promoter of studies in the field of performance indicators, studies learning styles, learning approaches, and he has been involved in a large number of national and international research and consultancy projects in countries of Africa, Middle America, and Asia.
Gracias.
Go ahead with Martin. Thanks.
Respected colleagues, thank you for inviting me to participate in this Educamp adventure. And I will do this by participating in this roundtable discussion that focuses on self-regulated learning in virtual learning environments. And I will start with a redefinition of what is actually the problem. And next, I will shift to, well, looking first at face-to-face learning environments and then shifting to online learning environments, and how this affects our opportunities to deal with self-regulated learning. Now, first of all, this problem. Well, self-regulated learning and learning environments, they really interact with the affordances of the specific setting in which we put our students. And these settings have changed, of course, due to COVID-19. For instance, here we see that Aristotnik, he really states that students experience a much, much larger workload. And though you could say the satisfaction with teaching support is still high, well, it drops mainly below 60 and often even 50%. And also all the support mechanisms they get, they also, in the appreciation of these support mechanisms, see that the satisfaction really drops. And what is the impact of this? Well, the impact is that we are at risk of having students drop out. And we know since decades that, especially when students are expected to study independently, so away from the institution, that we are at risk of dropout, and we have percentage between 20 to 80%. And these are all the typical factors that in fact are related to dropout. And you clearly see that depending on your definition, it's the typical regulation mechanisms, so the metacognitive part, but also in fact cognitive aspects and motivational aspects. So it means that the moment we move from face-to-face to online to virtual learning environments, we are in trouble. And we also know that predictors of dropouts, when we look, for instance, at learning analytics, that we look really at these aspects that are related to your engaged environment, the extent you interact with others, you interact with the materials, the way and time in the environment, so your time management issues. So we'll turn to this problem in terms of moving to virtual learning environments will in fact make the position of SRL critical for many students, because this change supposes that students master the competences, master the skills to cope with the environment, and there we have a big question mark. So the first thing we want to stress is that when we look at an existing face-to-face learning environment, many affordances of the typical traditional learning environment in fact support SRL. So you see a very strong investment in time and space constraints. Students have to come to a classroom, they have to come to attend classes, they have to spend time, they listen to clear direction, they interact, so their cognition, their metacognition and motivation is all the time pushed by these traditional way of teaching and learning, and they learn to cope with them. The big question mark is when you move to a virtual learning environment that we are at risk, because we lose all these affordances, because we give a lot of freedom to students. All of a sudden the time constraints are gone, the tools are gone, the interaction is at risk, the immediate feedback, the immediate sources for help, the immediate modeling they see from their teachers and peers and support staff, that's all gone. And that's why in many cases we see authors really pushing for stop giving too much freedom. We have to rethink, in fact, these environments. So the big question is, what are now the affordances for virtual learning environments that could compensate for losing all these facilities from the face-to-face environment? And here you see a list of how for each of the affordances that we normally have in a face-to-face setting that we can make choices. And this is but a first list, because the research really helps us to look at all kinds of approaches to support SRL, a virtual learning environment, but it requires an explicit design. And for instance, here we get this overview of Monteiro in the Portuguese setting, and she did in fact a very large review study, and you see that everything that is related to SRL is related to explicit course design, explicit invoking of interaction, explicit building on, developing skills related to, in fact, their knowledge and strategies and skills in relation to their management of the time, of their monitoring, of their planning, and their evaluation. In another way, we see, for instance, here how in this study we moved from traditional learning to a variety of e-learning environments, and we see, yes, indeed, there is a higher performance when we move to the e-learning based environments, but it all depends. We see, for instance, that blended learning and flipped classrooms, so where you have this mixture of face-to-face and online, is still superior as compared to e, and is to a large extent related to, for instance, the availability of immediate feedback, of direct involvement in guided questions. So in this study, for instance, we compared immediate feedback or delayed feedback, and we immediately see the moment we invest more in the feedback at each stage of the learning process, again, we have a larger, in fact, student performance and motivation. And here we have an international course, in fact, for teachers, university teachers. And in this course, we invested in a very strict planning in terms of time and space. There was no freedom here. Every week you had to do this, the next week that, and this for 6 teams. For each activity was a very strict, scripted, step-by-step guide, so that there was no time wasted by looking, what do I have to do? A typical question in online learning environments. The next one is a strong investment, giving the available research in feedback by peers, but also in giving feedback about the feedback to peers and experts. And lastly, you see a lot of group interaction, but all this group interaction was again scripted. The choice for these typical tools, approaches in the virtual learning environment were all based on research evidence. If you pull now everything together, well, we really should be careful. Virtual learning environments, they ask to reconsider and consider SRL. And we have to be aware that all the affordances of the traditional face-to-face environment get lost. So we need to compensate for this. And there are affordances of tools, approaches, aspects of a virtual learning environment that can help to, in fact, compensate for this loss. But it requires discipline, rigor, strict planning. The research underpins this. But the key facet is that for us, teachers, the design of such virtual learning environments will require time, effort, and specific expertise. Thank you.
Agradecemos a Martín compartirnos su
conocimiento. Thank Martin for sharing his experience and knowledge. Now our speaker is Jorge Bocio Montes de Oca. He's the director of digital learning in the University of Applied Science and Executive Secretary of MetaRed Peru. And he's a bachelor in library and information with master in business administration and political science. He has over 20 years of professional experience in the management of information and knowledge resources and services, design and evaluation of information technology projects, for the development and research on internet governance, and finally the use and impact of ICTs in societies. He has received the Amy Mahan Research Grant awarded by IDRC and the Incachi Research from the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru. Thank you, Mirna, and all the people that are looking to us from Europe and other continents. I'm happy to be here, and I would like to thank Silvia for the invitation. We're going to talk about autonomy. This is one of the main problems that we have had throughout that teachers needed to face. How to motivate students now that they are far away, outside of our reach. And the first thing we need to do is, if this is part of our education model. I belong to UPC, and the model established the principles, and within the principles we have the autonomous learning and auto-reflective learning. We define that level like providing the student with the tools to obtain the learning. And in the development of these principles, the university establishes something that is basic, and that would be granting the um, student with the process of learning. And as you can see, we need to grant the control for the student, but does the student really has the the power or not? We need to ask ourselves, are we truly providing the control to the student, or we're just the people that are controlling the space and everything that takes place there? So whenever we hear autonomous learning, that sounds like self-learning. I learn on my own. I have no help. I'm bored. And that's what they say in the surveys. Each time we ask them, because we have some surveys, of course, we ask them, do you consider that the course motivates their learning? We find these questions. We don't find them today. We have been finding them for quite some time because we have been implementing 10 years with blended learning.
Los docentes, las autoridades académicas, definimos absolutamente todo. Nosotros decimos qué se aprende, cuánto se aprende, cómo se aprende, cuándo se aprende,
So we
dónde se
decide where do we learn, how do we learn, who learns and who doesn't learn. Everything is defined by the teacher. The student doesn't have the control. So let's be honest with that. The student doesn't have the control at all, and they deserve having that. That's why it is important to what Eric Masur says. How does this pandemic build a great opportunity for that proposal? And we have had that for quite some time. So when we evaluate the students, we have done focus groups, some research, some surveys throughout those years, and we have found value. They value the synchronous aspect. Unlike what we think, we know that the asynchronous aspect is greater for them. And Mr. Masur was showing that in these physics classes because the students control their own dedication. They value learning, multimedia resources, something that catches their attention. They value the experience of learning digitally. They value order, structure, and this is related to the phrase because they are asking predictable routes. That's what their students are asking for. They're asking things that maybe we would say, what? What does this have to do with autonomy? Well, they're asking for clear rules, something that it is not that predictable. They want supporting, technical support, communication. Eric Masur was showing this graph showing that we needed to be in high support access in the educational aspect. So that involves several challenges because all of us are confined. So hardly they would do much to do it. They need to study. And they feel that they are not finding a support. What the universities do is strengthen this aspect. Regarding the support, whenever the student needs it, Eric Masur said that we need to suppress the college advisory. Why will we have to receive the student at the time that we want? Maybe they could have their own space to request for support. Eric Masur was proposing Slack. We were using Workplace. Now we are migrating to Yammer to provide an attention that will be full-time ready for the student on 24 hours for the swift of that perception. Now, the most important thing here is that autonomy is not related to grades or how much of students you were great. It depends on the um, self-esteem, the resilience, and to recover from a problem. No? We need to think that the learning is a social phenomenon, so we need to motivate the connections. And this is 100% advisable. A book from Professor Wolf says that the solution or network is the problem and at the same time is the solution. And we know that the conditions of the students are something that we need to consider. What does university need to do to respond to that requirement of development and autonomy? We don't need to change things in the students. We can change ourselves. We need to worry about eliminating self-imposed barriers. We have imposed ourselves the time and the space. We need to suppress that because we learn all the time. Always. We learn all the time. And we learn in all of this space, not when the teacher is, not only in the campus. We learn everywhere, all the time. The learning environment can be designed by the student, and we can provide the right to the student to design his learning space. We don't need to take the student elsewhere. We can redefine the concept of distance. When we talk about distance, we set the distance between the student and the teacher, between the student and the classroom, the student and other students. What's the distance that we want to measure? Once we know about the distance that's important, we can use that concept or our experiences. The distance is linked to the context and the student belongs to the social economical aspect. So when we take it to the classroom, we we take it out of that context. So let's make that the education aligns to the context of the student, that the exercises, the tools need to be organized by the same students. We need to exploit connections. We don't need to force schedules. Assessments need to be paired. The format needs to be multiple. They need to decide the format delivery. They need to find what's valuable for them. I love the Florence case because Florence was motivated by mission, not the document of approving, not the masters, the mission, what she's seeking in life. That's gonna make our students to have the control on the student process. And the good news is for us, what we need is to excite our students, provide feedback, accompany and participate because we are also learning. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Jorge. Muy interesante tu presentación.
Thank you. Your presentation was quite interesting. And the speech will be provided by Daniel Orna Munoz. He is the professor of environmental engineering in the University of Technology, UTEC. He has received PhD in the University of Kansas, DMS in civil engineering with a specialization in environmental fluid mechanics and hydrology from Stanford, and the PhD in civil and environmental engineering with Iowa. He has been a visiting professor in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering and Earth Sciences in Notre Dame, and he has participated in the summer research school called Fluid Dynamics of Sustainability and the Environment in the Department of Applied Mathematics and Theoretical Physics in the University of Cambridge. Go ahead, Daniel. Thank you, Mirna, for the presentation. Today we're going to talk about how in the direction of sciences we see the importance of providing the learning in environmental surroundings. We need to consider something that we are in times of change. Jorge mentioned that previously teaching was focused in the students. In that change, the philosophy, that's the only thing that has happened. And we have changes in the environmental tools. And I know that something that is constant is that the change is going to continue to take place in the throughout the years. So we need to be adapted to learn with change. If a classic class is focused on the professor, the only thing that the student is doing, absorbing knowledge, they need to learn how to learn. And finally, when the student leaves college in any environment, they're not going to tell you how much do you know. They're going to tell you how well you can do your work. And always you're going to have new things to do. The response will not be, I don't know. The response is, have the capacity to find the solution and learn when it comes to new challenges. The advantages that are understood when the student self-directs his learning is that they study on their own. The professor may provide certain activities that are directed for the student to learn on their own. And we're going to have many information from other places. And that's a quite advantage, but it means that the student is going to be exposed to several options that he has never seen before. And probably he has find his true passion behind of what he's doing. Not only that, but the student would realize that the learning takes place with each actions that they take. And it turns into a permanent learning throughout all the time. And the other thing is that we can learn on your own time. And how could that be translated is that we have, if we go to YouTube and if we don't understand something, we are learning at our own rhythm. But on the other side, we also have a sense of responsibility because the student is self-questioning and knowing if he or she understood the topics or not. So it is impossible to consider the sense of responsibility. I'm going to go to the advantage 4, then I'm going to go to advantage 3. Advantage 4 mentions that we can combine experiences. When students have diverse opportunities of learning from diverse sources, they're going to have diverse experiences or conclusions of learning. And by that, they can apply experiences to what we're doing. And I think that that helps them face new challenges in a new way. And that helps them and comes at a experience that is unique. For example, combining culture, mathematics as well. Another advantage is that we learn in community. What does that mean? Learn that students learn from others, learn with others, and always going to be in communication. Topic 3, from my point of view, is the most important thing. We learn in community and with others, we have exchange. Like I would explain and then you explain. It's like a service. You learn by collaborating and the information will be more democratic. So today I'm only going to speak about the red areas. What's the philosophy that we find in sciences motivating the students to be curious? Because without motivation, it doesn't make sense that we teach something. We teach students for them to learn and relearn or deconstruct the learning. What does that mean? It means that you can move in any environment and you can learn. If you have something difficult, you can learn something else. It involves lots of flexibility. We, we teach the student that the failure is part of the process, that learning is not a clean process. It's not A or B. It takes time, it takes dedication. The route is not direct, and it is part of what the student needs to realize as a route, as a learning route. We teach them to reflect, and we have that in each instance of learning. That's why the questions are quite important. From the point of view, from the teachers, the feedback is completely required to guide the process. And when I'm talking about the process, I'm saying that the feedback needs to be immediately as possible. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. The challenges that we have is that we receive the people that enter because we have 600 or 800 students that enter the organization, and the students are about 2,000 in all the university. So we need to consider what students are coming to the school. We receive students that are between 15 and 18 years old. And also we have access in technological tools. We manage plenary session and we complement that with sessions that are smaller to guide the students very well. And in that way, we balance that the course would be as personalized as possible. What we're doing is that we form communities. We provide alternatives like forums. The students win points because they answer each other. And we have several channels of communication, social media. We use Discord. Discord has multi-channels. And depending on the doubts that you may have or what you might do, you connect and you start interacting with others. We have a channel regarding memes of mathematics. And we know about about that, and we need to have access to the forums, social networks. It enable us for the information to stop being linear. It's about that the student interact with others. And we have a massive answer about that. All the classes improve. For example, we have several quizzes and we have questions with diverse learnings. And that, of course, has months of participation. And they have opportunities, like 3 opportunities. And these quizzes are designed according to a bag. And of course, all the questions will be diverse for all of the students. If we collaborate together, we learn from one another, and that's how we in that way we have feedback. Regarding the feedback, the students can have serious problems each week. And I provide feedback. They know what they're failing, what they have done right. We have Kahoot, and in that way we know what we're failing at. We know what we're failing, what do we need.
Daniel, ya estamos en
Have
tiempo.
other methodologies. Oh, sorry. We finish this. We have the learning-based, project-based learning, and in that way we decide how to solve problems. With that, I finish my presentation, and thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Talking about control. I'm sorry because I needed to cut you off, but we have finished the roundtable with the presentation, and now we're going to continue with the Q&A. The first question that I have is for Ulf, and it's what they're asking us is generally we think about the students in the university, right? And when we're teachers in this level, we think about these type of students will be full-time students. What they're asking us is how do we apply the proposal for working adults, and after that they have they are tired coming from their work. How can we apply that proposal maybe for those type of students?
Yeah, that's a good question. Not just for part-time students, for all students actually. I don't know if you can imagine that even my students who are full-time students, young full-time students, 20, 21, 24, sometimes they even say they are tired. And you know what? I believe that's because we are structuring our universities in a way that students have to listen passively to what we are saying. We are working them in a mode that we as teachers, we have a self-image. We as teachers, we have a role. We take a role as teachers as if we would know everything, and we are preaching to those who do not know anything the things which they need to know. So this image, that there are the knowing teachers preaching to those who don't know what they and we are preaching to them what they have to know. That's something which we have to break through. We have to ask our students to be those who deliver the problems to our classrooms. We have to send them out, and part-time students are wonderful because they are working or they are engaged in their family or in their community. And you can ask those students, please tell me in social sciences, for example, what are the problems you can observe at your workplace or in your family? Tell us about it. And then let's see how we can work with this and the theory of social sciences. Or in economy, you can ask them, tell us Try to analyze the system of the organizations in which you're working. Try to find the breaks and the cracks in the system. Try to find those places and positions where the system is not working, where the organization is not working. Let's define a project out of these challenges and let's solve them. And then you have a problem-based classroom in which students are working with what's mattering to them. Teachers are coaches. That's the way to go forward and how to engage them. And then I think the problem of being tired might be a little bit moderated.
Muchas gracias, Ol. La siguiente pregunta es para Jorge. Jorge, nos preguntan sobre el tema de evaluación de aprendizaje y existe la preocupación de que al dejar esta evaluación con tanta apertura, tan flexible, ¿dónde quedaría el control para evitar suplantaciones?
Perdón. Esa también es una de las principales preocupaciones que han surgido durante la pandemia, ¿no? El tema de las suplantaciones, el tema de la probidad académica, el tema de cómo hacemos para asegurarnos que el estudiante al cual nosotros estamos evaluando es quien dice ser, ¿no?
How do we make sure that we need to do that, right? Change the logic in the information, be quite radical, and the delineation. We know that we need to be in that time, right? We need to take that pandemic and think that we need to evaluate the process of construction, and the result is easy to copy. The process is very hard to copy. So we need to refocus the evaluation into something that is the most important thing. We don't need to think about the what you provide in the end, but your effort between the studies and what we have done for providing that. So we need to refocus this towards the process, not only until the result. And we are going to find many things. Thank you, Jorge. Now we have a final question for Daniel. They're asking how to work with the self-directed learning by motivation with the available time of students. We only have 3 minutes because I know that I'm sure that you don't have much time, but we are right up with time, okay? Mirna, this is something that is quite complex. Students, if he has the flexibility to learn on their own, there's a devotion of time, and the time can be multiplied. Maybe the teacher was not able to see or foresee that in time, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is regarding the resources. We need to think what resources we're talking about. Nowadays, there's lots of failures, like accessing tools. If I want to give a short answer, motivation to the student needs to be not only as part of the class, but I understood that class provides a team to be motivated by the class. We could have contests of photography to be connected with the classes. And there's many ways where the teacher can motivate the students. Regarding time, we can analyze that, and you're never going to find a direct measure, but the teacher needs to have estimations that are reasonable. And for that, we get together with students and we propose that the classes in that case.
Ok, pues muchas gracias. Ahora nos sobraron los 2 minutos, pero bueno.
Okay, we were having some time left, so thank you for the information. This event is directed to teachers, and with that, with the knowledge that we have and the experience, we can enrich in a way our own practice, solve the challenges in the pandemic, and especially provide a greater dimension of the learning process. So to conclude, in the name of UTEC, I would like to thank Ulf, Martin, Jorge, Daniel for your participation in this second edition of Educamp. And of course, I would like to thank all of the attendees that are connected to this roundtable. I would like to say bye-bye, inviting you to the next session. Thank you.